There are three certainties in modern suburban life: death, taxes, and a homeowners association president who derives a quasi-religious ecstasy from the specific shade of beige used on a picket fence. In my neighborhood, that high priestess of taupe, that doyen of dull, was Brenda. And I, Alex, was about to become her number one heretic. It all started, as most suburban conflicts do, with a quiet morning, a cup of coffee, and a honey-do list that had been gathering dust for a politically unacceptable amount of time. I was in my home office, a glorious sanctuary of organized chaos overlooking my backyard. The coffee was perfect, the birds were chirping, and I was deep into the critical work of seeing if I could beat my personal best in Minesweeper. Life was good. I work from home as a graphic designer, which is a fancy way of saying I get paid to argue about fonts and drink coffee in my sweatpants. It's the American dream, or at least my version of it. The real American dream, however, was my wife, Isabella Rossi, Izzy. She was the yin to my chaotic yang, the sharp, focused laser to my scattered glitter bomb personality. And as of this morning, she was also the city's brand new chief of police. She'd been on the force for 15 years, climbing the ladder with a tenacity and brilliance that still left me in awe. Today was her first official day in the big chair. She walked into my office, looking so sharp in her freshly pressed, starched uniform that I felt like I should probably stand up and salute. The fabric was a dark, authoritative blue, the brass buttons gleamed, and the new badge on her chest seemed to hum with a power that could curdle milk. "Morning, slacker," she said, her lips twitching into a smile as she took in my attire, a faded t-shirt with a picture of a cat playing a synthesizer in space, and plaid pajama pants that had seen better decades. "Morning, Chief," I replied, giving her a slow, appreciative once-over. "You look like you're about to go arrest the concept of crime itself. I'm very intimidated, and also weirdly turned on." She rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected over a decade of marriage to me. She walked over to the window, coffee cup in hand, and her smile faded just a little. She was looking at the fence. The fence. The great, rotting, gray-wooded monstrosity that separated our yard from the immaculate, golf course-worthy lawn of our neighbors. It was less a fence and more a collection of sad, splintered planks leaning on each other for moral support. "That fence, Alex," she said, her voice dropping into that calm, measured tone that meant business. "It's an eyesore. It's practically a public nuisance. It's whispering insults to the neighborhood property values." "I think it has character," I argued weakly. "It's rustic." "It's a tetanus risk," she countered, turning to face me. She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes glinting over the rim of the mug. "Don't make me write you a citation on my first day, honey. It would be a terrible abuse of power, and the paperwork is a nightmare." I held up my hands in surrender. Okay. You've convinced me. The fence's reign of terror ends today. I'll make the call." "See that you do," she said, her smile returning. She leaned in, gave me a quick, firm kiss, and headed for the door. "Have fun on your little project. I've got a city to run." And with that, the new chief of police was gone, leaving me alone with my coffee and a new, urgent mission. Operation Replace the Damn Fence. I had no idea I was about to declare war. I finished my coffee, opened a new browser tab, and typed in "fence contractors near me." The first result that popped up was Dave and Gary's Fence-tastic Services, complete with a 5-star rating and a logo that looked like it was designed by a hyperactive beaver. It was perfect. I gave them a call. Less than an hour later, a beat-up Ford F-150 that sounded like a rock tumbler full of angry badgers rumbled to a stop in front of my house. The doors flew open, and out stepped the dream team. Dave was a short, wiry man with a cyclone of frantic energy, a pencil-thin mustache, and a sales patter that moved at the speed of sound. Gary was his polar opposite, a mountain of a man with a beard that looked like it housed several small, hibernating animals. He moved slowly, deliberately, and communicated primarily through a series of eloquent grunts. "Alex, good to meet ya," Dave said, crushing my hand in a surprisingly strong grip. "Dave, this here's Gary. We're here to make your fence dreams a reality. So, what are we thinking? What's the vision?" I led them to the backyard. Gary stared at the old fence, stroked his beard, and let out a low rumble that sounded vaguely like, "Huh. She's a real piece of work, ain't she?" Dave said, patting one of the rotting posts, which wobbled precariously. "A classic. I'd say she's got another." 2-3 days before she just gives up on life and lays down for a nap. That's the consensus, I said. My wife threatened to arrest it, or me. It was a little unclear. I just need something sturdy. Something that says, "This is my property, please keep your unsolicited advice and yappy dogs on your side of the line." Ah, Gary grunted, his eyes showing a flicker of understanding. An HOA. You've dealt with them before? I asked. Dave let out a short, barking laugh. Son, we've fought more wars with HOAs than most small countries. We know the bylaws. We know the loopholes. We know the secret handshakes. So, you want the good neighbor package? The Fort Knox special? We got wood. We got vinyl. We got a chain link option if you're expecting a zombie apocalypse. Let's stick with wood for now, I said. Something simple, clean. A nice, modern horizontal slat design. We were in the middle of discussing the merits of cedar versus pressure-treated pine when a new presence made itself known. It was a sharp, commanding voice that cut through the morning air like a shard of glass. Excuse me. We all turned. Marching across the pristine lawn next door was a woman who looked like she was genetically engineered in a lab to be the perfect specimen of a suburban menace. She had the classic, sharply angled blonde bob, a tennis visor pulled down low, and a pastel pink tracksuit. Clutched to her chest like a holy text was a massive 3-inch binder. Trotting nervously at her heels was a small, fluffy white dog wearing a tiny, diamond-studded collar. I'm Brenda, the president of the Homeowners Association, she announced, her voice a masterclass in passive aggression. She stopped just short of my property line, eyeing the three of us with deep suspicion. I don't recall seeing an approval request for any structural modifications on this property submitted to the Architectural Review Committee. I plastered on my most charming, insincere smile. Brenda, a pleasure. I'm Alex. This is Dave, and the big fella is Gary. We're not modifying anything just yet. We're simply admiring the architectural integrity of this fine historical fence. Yep, Dave chimed in, catching on immediately. A real beaut. We were just saying it's got such patina. Brenda's eyes narrowed. She did not look like a woman who appreciated patina. That fence is a disgrace. It's in direct violation of Bylaw 17, subsection C, regarding general upkeep and aesthetic harmony. I've sent you 3 notices. Ah, yes, the notices, I said, nodding thoughtfully. I've filed them in a very safe place. Look, Brenda, the good news is we're on the same side. I'm getting rid of this disgrace. Dave and Gary here are going to put up a brand new, non-disgraceful fence. Everybody wins. This did not seem to placate her. If anything, her posture became even more rigid. She opened her binder with a loud snap, the plastic rings echoing like a gunshot in the quiet morning. Prince Fluffybutt III let out a nervous yip. All new construction must be pre-approved, she declared, running a perfectly manicured finger down a printed page. The plans must be submitted in triplicate, a materials list must be provided, and all construction must adhere to the community's aesthetic guidelines. Specifically, the color. Here we go. The color? I asked, feigning innocence. The bylaws are very clear, she said, her voice dropping as if she were revealing a sacred truth. All fences must be Sahara beige. It promotes neighborhood harmony. I looked at Dave. He looked at me. Gary continued to stare at the fence, seemingly lost in deep thought. Sahara beige. It sounded less like a color and more like a punishment. Sahara beige. I repeated slowly, letting the name roll off my tongue. I don't know, Dave. It feels a little predictable. A little beige, you know? Dave stroked his chin. I see what you're saying, Alex. We want to make a statement. We want to stand out. What do you think about electric flamingo pink? Ooh, I like that, I said. Bold, daring. Or what about screaming chartreuse? That would really pop against the green of the lawn. I've got a half-gallon of Rage Red in the truck, Dave offered. We could do an accent wall, a feature fence post, if you will. Brenda's face, which had been a carefully controlled mask of condescension, began to twitch. A small vein pulsed in her temple. Prince Fluffybutt III, sensing his owner's distress, began to bark in a high-pitched, frantic rhythm. This is not a laughing matter, she snapped, her voice rising in pitch. This is a legally binding covenant. You will submit the plans, you will use the approved materials, and you will paint the fence Sahara beige, or I will fine you into oblivion. I will be issuing a formal warning. She spun on her heel, a maneuver so sharp her tracksuit made a swoosh sound, and marched back to her house, the yapping dog trailing in her wake. Dave, Gary, and I stood in silence for a moment, watching her go. Then Dave let out a low whistle. "Woo! She's a live one." "She's the final boss of the suburbs," I said, feeling a strange sense of exhilaration. This was going to be more fun than I thought. Gary finally spoke, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "We'll need more beer." I couldn't have agreed more. The first shot had been fired in the Great Fence War of 2025, and I, for one, was ready for battle. The following Monday, the revolution began. Dave and Gary arrived at the ungodly hour of 7:30 a.m., their truck backfiring twice as it pulled up, a beautiful, cacophonous announcement of our intentions. They set up their tools with the practiced efficiency of a military unit, and then came the masterstroke, a large, portable radio, which Dave promptly tuned to a classic rock station. The opening riff of AC/DC's Thunderstruck blasted through the tranquil suburban morning. It was glorious. The demolition of the old fence was a deeply satisfying experience. With each splintering plank and groaning post that Gary tore down, I felt a weight lifting off my soul. Dave provided a running commentary, cheering Gary on like a ringside announcer. From my office window, I could see the curtains twitching in Brenda's house. A new notice, printed in a 48-point angry red font, was already taped to my front door by the time I went to get the mail at 10. "Your so-called music is a blatant violation of the peace and quiet covenant. Bylaw 23. This is your second warning." I chuckled, adding it to the growing collection on my fridge. Brenda, however, was not a woman to be trifled with. She was a warrior, and this was her personal Thermopylae. She quickly escalated from passive-aggressive notes to active guerrilla warfare. Her first move was subtle. She began a new, aggressive watering schedule for the prize-winning petunias that bordered our property line. I was working at my desk when I noticed a fine mist coating my window. I looked out to see Brenda, clad in full gardening gear, holding a hose with the nozzle set to jet stream, aimed conveniently so that a significant amount of overspray was drenching the freshly poured concrete footings for our new fence posts. I watched, mesmerized, as she meticulously watered every single one. When she saw me watching, she gave me a tight, vicious little smile and a small wave. Her next tactic was espionage. The following afternoon, I was enjoying a sandwich on my porch when a flash of light caught my eye. I scanned the area, and there, nestled amongst the dense foliage of a large azalea bush on her property, was Brenda. She was dressed in what I can only describe as suburban camouflage symphony of beige and khaki, and she was holding a camera with a telephoto lens the size of a Pringles can. She was documenting the violations, no doubt building a case for the HOA Supreme Court. When our eyes met, she didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. She just adjusted her focus and took another picture. I gave her a jaunty pose, one hand on my hip, and blew her a kiss. The situation was reaching a delicious level of absurdity, and it was about to get even better. On Wednesday, just as Dave and Gary were hoisting the first beautiful, horizontal slatted panel into place, a squad car pulled up to the curb. "Uh-oh," Dave said, lowering the panel. "The fun police have arrived." Out stepped two officers. One was a young, fresh-faced kid who looked like he'd just graduated from the academy yesterday. He had that eager, by-the-book look in his eye. The other was older, heavy-set, with a mustache that had seen things and a world-weary sigh that seemed to be his default setting. I walked out to meet them, making sure to grab my t-shirt of the day. This one said, "I'm not lazy. I'm on energy-saving mode." "Good morning, officers," I said cheerfully. "What can I do for you?" The older one, whose name tag read Jenkins, gestured vaguely toward Brenda's house. She was already marching toward them, binder in hand. "We got a call about a disturbance. Unauthorized construction, noise pollution, general threat to the fabric of society. You know the drill." "Ah," I said. "A Brenda-related emergency. I should have guessed." Brenda arrived, breathless and indignant. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man," she said, pointing a trembling finger at me, "is refusing to comply with the community covenants. He's using unapproved materials, his contractors are causing a racket, and I have reason to believe his fence posts are a quarter of an inch off the approved setback line." The rookie, Officer Miller, pulled out a notepad and began taking her statement with grave seriousness. "A quarter of an inch, you say, ma'am?" Jenkins just looked at me, a flicker of shared suffering in his eyes. "You got a permit for this, sir?" he asked, his voice flat. "Right here, officer," I said, pulling the folded permit from my back pocket and handing it to him. "City approved and everything." As for the noise, I believe Back in Black is considered a cultural touchstone and not, in fact, a weapon of psychological warfare, though I understand how Brenda might confuse the two. Jenkins scanned the permit and handed it back. "Looks fine to me." Miller, however, was still deep in conversation with Brenda. "And what about the color, ma'am?" "He's refusing to use Sahara beige!" Brenda wailed, as if revealing I was building the fence out of smuggled plutonium. Jenkins's mustache twitched. He was trying not to smile. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Brenda with the patience of a saint. "A fence is a civil matter. As long as he has a permit and he's on his property, there's not much we can do. It's not a police matter unless it's on fire or made of illegal narcotics." "But the bylaws!" she insisted. "The bylaws are not the laws, Jenkins said slowly, as if explaining it to a child. "Have a nice day, folks." He turned and walked back to the squad car, leaving Miller to stammer a hasty goodbye and scurry after him. As they drove away, I saw Jenkins shake his head. Brenda stood on the sidewalk, vibrating with impotent rage. I gave her a little salute. She responded with a look that could strip paint. I thought that would be the peak of the conflict. I was wrong. So wrong. 2 days later, the project was complete. The fence was a thing of beauty, strong, elegant, with clean lines and the lovely natural scent of fresh cedar. The crown jewel was the new gate at the end of my driveway, a sturdy, handsome structure that swung open and closed with a satisfying, solid thunk. Dave and Gary packed up their tools, we shook hands. I paid them, including the extra for the combat pay and beer, and they rumbled off down the street, leaving a trail of classic rock in their wake. Peace had been restored. That evening, Izzy came home and gave the fence a thorough inspection. She walked its length, tested the gate, and nodded in approval. "Not bad, Alex," she said. "Not bad at all. It's very beige adjacent." "It's natural cedar," I said proudly. "It speaks for itself." "Well, I'm glad that's over," she said, giving my shoulder a squeeze. "No more drama with the neighbors." Famous last words. The next morning, I woke up with a craving for one of the sinfully good donuts from the bakery across town. It was a beautiful Saturday. The sun was shining. I grabbed my keys, a cup of coffee, and headed for the garage. I pushed the button for the garage door, backed my car out, and came to a sudden halt. My way was blocked. Parked directly in front of my brand new gate, so close that the bumpers were almost touching, was a gleaming, pristine, white SUV. Brenda's SUV. She had created a perfect, immovable blockade. I was trapped. I looked over at her house. She was standing on her front porch, arms crossed, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face. She held a travel mug of what I presumed was the bitter tea of her victory. She gave me a tiny, condescending wave. The war wasn't over. It had just entered its final, most glorious phase, and Brenda had no idea what kind of firepower I had in my corner. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated rage. I wanted to lay on my horn until the battery died. I wanted to scream obscenities. I wanted to see if my car, a sensible sedan, could win a pushing match against her much larger, much more expensive SUV. But then, a second, more powerful instinct took over. The instinct of a seasoned smart aleck who recognizes a golden opportunity for comedic justice when he sees one. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a beautifully wrapped gift of future gloating. I killed the engine, got out of my car, and just stared at the blockade. It was, I had to admit, a masterstroke of petty tyranny. She hadn't damaged my property. She hadn't technically trespassed. She had just used her own property to make my life impossible. It was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of yelling, I pulled out my phone. First, I took a picture. A nice, wide shot that captured the absurdity of the situation. Her giant white yacht, completely sealing off my driveway. I sent it to Izzy with a simple caption. "Having a bit of a hostage situation here. The perpetrator is armed with a superiority complex and a white SUV. Send donuts." Then, I leaned against my car, took a sip of my now lukewarm coffee, and made the call. "Hey, honey," I said, my voice dripping with casual innocence when she picked up. Alex, I'm in a briefing, she replied, her voice low and professional. I could hear the murmur of other voices in the background. Is the house on fire? No, no, nothing that dramatic, I said breezily. Just a quick legal question for a friend of mine. Hypothetically, of course. Say this friend was being, well, illegally detained is a strong phrase. But let's go with it. Say someone were to, hypothetically, use their vehicle to block this friend's driveway, preventing them from leaving. What would the legal ramifications of such an action be? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her brilliant, legally trained mind. Alex, is this about Brenda again? The name is not important, I insisted. What's important is that a citizen's right to egress is being flagrantly violated. It's a matter of civil liberties, Izzy, and I'm out of milk, which is a tragedy of its own. Another pause, this one shorter. I heard her sigh, a sound I knew and loved. It was her, my husband is a lovable moron sigh. Did you ask her to move? She's just standing on her porch smiling at me. It's creepy, Izzy. It's a smile of pure, unadulterated evil. Okay, she said, and I could hear the shift in her tone. The wife was receding, and the chief was emerging. Here's what your friend should do. Do not engage her. Do not yell. Do not touch her car. Call the non-emergency police line. Report an illegally parked vehicle blocking your driveway. Be polite, be calm, let them handle it. I have to go. Got it, I said. Love you, Chief. Love you too, you idiot, she replied, and the line went dead. I followed her instructions to the letter. I dialed the non-emergency number. Yes, hello, I said politely to the dispatcher. I'd like to report a vehicle blocking my driveway at 123 Maple Drive. I gave them the make, model, and license plate of Brenda's SUV. Yes, I'm completely blocked in. Thank you so much. Then, I waited. And I enjoyed the show. Brenda remained on her porch, smugness radiating from her like heat from asphalt. She clearly thought I was calling a tow truck, a move that would get messy and likely involve civil court. She had no idea I was bringing in the cavalry. 15 minutes later, a familiar squad car rolled down the street and parked behind Brenda's SUV. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped Officer Jenkins. He got out of the car, took one look at the white SUV, then at me standing by my car, then at Brenda standing on her porch, and he let out a long, theatrical, suffering sigh that echoed down the quiet street. It was a thing of beauty. Let me guess, he said, walking up to me, forgoing any official greeting. The beige brigade strikes again. She's escalated to full-on vehicular imprisonment, Jenkins, I said gravely. I fear for my freedom, my donutless freedom. He cracked a smile, the first I'd ever seen from him. All right, let's get this over with. Jenkins walked with the slow, plodding gait of a man who was being paid by the hour and intended to take his sweet time. He approached Brenda's porch with a calm demeanor. Ma'am, he said, his voice polite but firm. You need to move your vehicle. You're illegally blocking a private driveway. Brenda puffed out her chest. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. I will do no such thing, she declared, her voice ringing with misplaced righteousness. The HOA covenants state that I have oversight over all aesthetic matters in this community, and that gate, she pointed a finger at my beautiful new gate, is a monstrosity. It's not Sahara beige. I am making a citizen's stand. I demand to speak to your superior. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Jenkins's face. It was the smile of a man who has just been handed a royal flush. My superior? He asked, his voice deceptively mild. You want to speak to my superior? Ma'am, as you wish. He turned his back on her, walked back toward his car, and calmly picked up his radio microphone. His voice was quiet, but I heard every glorious word. Dispatch, can you have the chief give me a call regarding a recurring civil dispute at 123 Maple Drive? My heart skipped a beat. This was going to be even better than I had imagined. A moment later, Jenkins's work phone rang. He had a brief, quiet conversation, a massive grin growing on his face. He nodded a few times, said, Yes, Chief. Understood, Chief, and hung up. He leaned against his car, crossed his arms, and waited. Brenda looked confused. She clearly expected a sergeant to show up, someone she could browbeat with her binder of bylaws. She had no idea she'd just used her one phone call to summon the god of thunder. 2 minutes later, a vehicle turned onto our street. It wasn't a squad car. It was a sleek, black, unmarked sedan with tinted windows and official government plates. It moved with a silent, predatory grace. It pulled to a stop behind Jenkins's cruiser. From my vantage point in the driveway, I held my breath. The driver's side door opened. A polished black shoe stepped out, followed by a crisp, perfectly creased blue trouser leg. And then, out she stepped. Chief of Police Isabella, Izzy Rossi. My Izzy. She was in her full uniform, the one that made her look like a superhero. She slowly put on her sunglasses, the dark lenses hiding her eyes, and surveyed the scene with an air of absolute, unshakable authority. The effect was instantaneous. Brenda's smug expression just melted. It slid off her face and was replaced by a comical series of micro-expressions: confusion, then a flicker of recognition, then dawning comprehension, and finally, sheer, unadulterated, pants-wetting terror. Her eyes darted from the immaculate, powerful police chief to me, standing in my driveway with a grin so wide it hurt my face, and back again. The color drained from her face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white that was definitely not Sahara beige. Izzy walked slowly, deliberately, until she was standing right in front of Brenda. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, quiet, and utterly chilling. "Good morning. I'm Chief Rossi. Officer Jenkins tells me you wish to speak with me." Chief Rossi," Brenda stammered, her voice a squeak. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize what, Mrs.?" Izzy paused, letting the question hang in the air. "It's Brenda, isn't it? You didn't realize that your neighbor, Mr. Alex Parker, the man whose driveway you are illegally obstructing, is my husband?" From the driveway, I couldn't help myself. I gave a little wave. "Hi, honey. Having a good first week?" Izzy shot me a look that said, "Don't push it," before turning her full, undivided attention back to the quivering wreck that was Brenda. "You demanded to speak to my superior," Izzy continued, her voice like ice. "Here I am. So let's talk. Let's talk about City Ordinance 4.17, obstructing a public right-of-way. That's a $200 fine and 2 points on your license. Then we can discuss Penal Code 236, false imprisonment. That's a misdemeanor, Brenda. It carries a potential fine of up to $1,000 and a year in county jail." Brenda made a small choking sound. "And while we're at it," Izzy said, taking a small step closer, "let's have a look at the multiple complaints of harassment Officer Jenkins has been logging from this address. A pattern of harassment can be grounds for a restraining order. Are you familiar with restraining orders, Brenda?" Brenda just shook her head, her eyes wide with panic. "So here are your options," Izzy said, laying them out with the precision of a surgeon. Option A. You get in your car, you move it immediately, you accept the ticket for the illegal parking violation that Officer Jenkins is currently writing, and you never, ever speak to or about my husband or his fence again. Option B. I have your car impounded, I have you placed under arrest for false imprisonment, and I will personally ensure the district attorney's office receives a very, very detailed file on your activities. The choice is yours. Take your time." Brenda didn't need time. She didn't even seem to be breathing. She fumbled in her tracksuit pocket, her hands shaking so violently she could barely retrieve her keys. She stammered out something that sounded like an apology, scrambled into her SUV, and started it with a roar. She backed up so quickly she nearly hit the curb, and then peeled out down the street as if the hounds of hell were on her tail. Jenkins walked over, handed me a copy of the ticket he'd written for Brenda, and tipped his hat. "Have a good day, Mr. Parker." I looked at my wife, the magnificent, terrifying, beautiful chief of police, standing there like a statue of justice. She pushed her sunglasses up on her head and finally looked at me, a stern expression on her face. "Don't think this gets you out of mowing the lawn this weekend." "Yes, Chief," I said, snapping into a mock salute. "Whatever you say, Chief." She rolled her eyes, but I saw it. A tiny, irrepressible smile. Victory had never tasted so sweet. That evening, the backyard was filled with the triumphant aroma of grilled meat and sweet, sweet justice. The new fence stood as a proud monument to our victory. Dave and Gary had come back over, ostensibly to inspect their work, but really because I'd promised them free beer and a front row seat to the retelling of the story. Izzy, now back in her civilian identity of jeans and a comfortable sweater, was holding court. She recounted the final showdown with the dry, understated wit that I adored, while Dave, Gary, and I provided the enthusiastic color commentary. And then the chief here, Dave said, gesturing with a half-eaten burger. She lays it all out. Penal codes, ordinances. It was like watching one of them lawyer shows on TV, but better, 'cause it was real. I ain't never seen a Karen fold that fast. It was beautiful, man. Like watching a nature documentary. Gary, who had been silently demolishing a plate of ribs, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and made his contribution. Poetic, he rumbled. I'm just glad it's over, Izzy said, though she was clearly enjoying the hero worship. She looked at me, her eyes sparkling in the light from the tiki torches I'd insisted on putting up. But I expect this fence to remain in pristine condition. I have a reputation to uphold now. The chief of police can't have a husband with a shabby fence. Your wish is my command, I said, raising my beer bottle in a toast. To the chief. And to fences that are the correct, non-legally binding shade of natural cedar. We all clinked our bottles together. The sound of our laughter filled the evening air, a sound that felt more liberating than ever before within the confines of our newly secured fortress. The fallout from Brenda's public humiliation was swift and glorious. News in a suburb like ours travels faster than gossip in a high school cafeteria. The story of the standoff at the Parker place became an instant neighborhood legend, embellished with each retelling. By Monday, Brenda was a pariah. People would cross the street to avoid her. Her morning power walks became solitary, hurried affairs. The final nail in the coffin of her reign came on Tuesday, via email. It was a mass message sent to the entire HOA mailing list. The subject line was simple. OA President Resignation. Brenda was stepping down, effective immediately, citing personal reasons, and a desire to focus on other pursuits. I printed the email, put it in a cheap black frame I bought online, and hung it in my office right next to my diploma. It felt like an equivalent achievement. A few weeks later, a new era of peace and reason had dawned on our quiet little street. The new HOA president was a laid-back guy named Tom, who worked in IT, and whose primary concern was making sure the annual block party had a decent craft beer selection. The reign of terror was officially over. One perfect Saturday afternoon, I was doing exactly what a man in his suburban paradise should be doing. Absolutely nothing. I was lounging on a comfortable chair in my backyard, a cold beer sweating on the table beside me, admiring my fence. It really was a great fence. Just then, I saw a flash of movement across the street. It was Brenda, scurrying from her front door to her car. She moved with the furtive energy of a wanted fugitive. Our eyes met for a split second across the street. I saw a flicker of panic in her expression. I smiled. It wasn't a smug smile or a triumphant one. It was a big, friendly, cheerful wave. A hello, neighbor kind of wave. The effect was astounding. She physically recoiled as if I'd thrown something at her. She fumbled with her car door, yanked it open, and threw herself inside, peeling out of her driveway like she was making a getaway. I watched her go, and a profound sense of peace washed over me. I took a long, satisfying sip of my beer and leaned back in my chair, soaking in the warm sun. They say good fences make good neighbors, and that might be true. But I've learned that sometimes a good fence, a couple of laid-back contractors with a taste for classic rock, and a brilliant, beautiful wife who just happens to be the new chief of police, well, that makes for paradise. And the sweet, sweet taste of a victory that's the perfect shade of whatever the hell I want.